It's Channel Grim and Grin's Monster Bites, the Silent Screams. This episode, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Not only is the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari arguably the first full-length horror film ever made, and not only is it one of my favorite silent horror films ever made, it is beyond this, one of my favorite films, period. Coming out in 1920, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari perfected German Expressionism and catapulted it into the default language for Gothic horror in cinema for the rest of time. If you've ever watched any horror film with creepy shadows, dark, ominous buildings, and unsettling monstrous beings, chances are at some point in its history, it was inspired by the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Told through the framing device of an unreliable narrator, the movie establishes a strange, dreamlike surreal setting with twisted buildings, unnatural angles and shadows, and nightmarish fiends. The film begins with a creepy carnival having come to town, which I can't help but wonder if it didn't inspire Ray Bradbury's famous Something Wicked This Way Comes, written 40 years later. Amongst the strange sideshows and rides is the insane Dr. Caligari and his bizarre exhibition of a somnambulist, a man who has slept his entire life but can be controlled with hypnotic suggestions by the doctor. Using this somnambulist named Caesar, the mad Dr. Caligari puts on a show where he does fun things like walk around on stage and predict people's deaths. Interestingly enough, his prediction proves true, though it doesn't say too much about his soothsaying, as Caesar himself carries out the murder. The story gets somewhat convoluted after this. After a few more murders and a kidnapping, it's eventually revealed that Dr. Caligari is actually a psychologist at a nearby asylum who is using Caesar to recreate another string of murders carried out by the historical Dr. Caligari, who also used a somnambulist to carry out murders. Beyond trying to understand how somnambulism works and perhaps being a bit of a fanboy, there's not much more motivation explained here, although as weird and convoluted as that plot is, you sort of forgive it because of the fact that the whole film is the ramblings of an unreliable narrator. It's okay that the movie has dream logic because it's sort of being delivered to you by a guy in a walking dream. And if this is all sounding a little bizarre to you, that's because it is. It's really bizarre, and also extremely entertaining and insanely influential. So if you've not yet seen the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, this October is your chance.
Caesar!